genesis of intersex organizing on the continent was very small and slow. The very first voices came from South Africa by a colleague who is now late, called Sally Gross. And she started the conversation to actually be able to speak to a government official about the state of having anatomy that is not atypical. But as it were, it was the fight or the struggle of an individual. But what it did is that it brought to the forefront the fact that these kind of people exist. And then I think the next kind of wave then came from Uganda here with my own story when it came out back in 1997. And so that is how, on a very small scale, activism started. But it was us fighting to occupy space as individuals, saying, look, I'm here, this is how, this is what happened to me, and I have a right to be here, and I think I have something to say.
James Karanja identifies himself as male and appears to be an energetic young man. However, Karanja is an intersex and was previously known as Mary Waithera.
When I was born, my mother thought that I was a girl. They named me Mary Waithera. Those are the names that I grew up with.
The situation of the intersex community in Kenya is one thing. Basically, because we do not have, for example, legal protection. We do not have a well or information within the society on who are intersex persons and how to handle intersex persons.
Zambia only recognizes the two binaries of sex, which is male and female. So when a child is born, you find that doctors will just choose what to write there, and it doesn't, indicate that this person was born intersex or anything.
And compared to where we started from 2008, things were not easy because of stigma, discrimination, how people look at intersex issues, the big issue, people relating intersex to homosexuality, which is not necessarily the case.
How do I come to know that I'm not like other girls? Yeah. One time, there's this thing of visiting the bush. Girls, go to visit the bush. Wow, that's when I discovered that, you know what? There is a difference between like the other girls and me.
When a child is born, the first question they'll be asked is it a boy, is it a girl? And here you are, doctors telling you that this child is, neither male nor female. So you start wondering, what am I going to tell, people back when I go back into the society? And parents are now under pressure to sort of have an identity, and in this case we are talking about the gender, because when we go to society we are talking about the social construct, which is gender. And mostly you find that now a child has to be assigned a gender.
Kati mukusooka tetwamanya mwana, abasawo bennyini nabo tebamanya mwana kibwenzadde. Kati bwe tubabuuza mwana nzadde ki, basooka banga nzadde mulenzi. Kati abamawulire ne batwala nti nzadde ki, mulenzi. Abasawo ne bakoma nti azadde muwala. Ate ne tuddamu nti ate omwana. Kati naffe tuzadde muwala ate kiki tukebera ku mwana. Omwana aliko akantu akatini nga ak'omusajja. Kati tubeera awo nembeera n'omwana. Kati baba tuko kusibula nazaalira mu kiriniki. Omusawo n'angamba kino ekintu ojja kitwala e Mulago. Bino buntu kangu bajja ne Mulago bakatereza.
kale teyakkirizanga abantu kati omuntu namukyalira anaazeeko ng'ekyo takikkiriza era we yanaazanga yapapanga nnyo like okumbika
nze omwana wange nga teri amunaaliza ataani ne ku mulimu nga nze mbeera awo nenyingira munda ne naaza omwana wange ne mukyusa nappi n'entekakera nga teri akola ki nga ye muntu wati era nga nze bwe mba nnina wengeeza oba ngenda kukyala ze simulekera muntu omwana wange nagendanga naye ate kaali yazaalibwa nga mutono ngamba akana kange katono ntambula nako naye nga nze ne mukuba mumbeera bwetyo paka n'atambula n'akola ki byonna paka yatuuka okugenda ku ssomero era yayambalanga buli nagenda ku ssomero nadda.
Alani mwana wange nze muzaala era nga mwana yazaalibwa nga ekikula kye tekituukiridde mu butonde bwe ng'omuntu bw'alina okubeera nga tosobola kumanya nti mukazi oba musajja. Bwe nazaala Alani saasooka kitegeerawo nti mulwadde aba wabula wayise ennaku 2 kitegeera mu mbeera y'okubanga yali tafuka. We namukeberera nentegeera nti obutonde bwe si butegeera gamanga ne waafukira obulungi takola ki ntalinaawo nenkinyitira kitaawe nenkimulaga. Bwe namumubikkulira n'amutunuulira naye nga tamutegeera kyetwakola ffenna twadda mu maziga kati enkeera bwakeererawo nadduka mulago bwe baamala omwekebejje ne baŋŋamba omwana muzzeeyo ojja muleeta ng'awezezza emyaka 3 alongoosebwe.
Twali awo taata n'afuna abantu yawulira ebintu ku TV oba yawulira akalango ku TV akasipidi ke yateekayo then taata najja waka was like n'agamba mama about the CPD n'abawa essimu then mama n'agenda by that time baali bakolera nateete n'agendayo n'ayogera nawo
kati awo nga munawe bw'omanyi mu kusooka nagenda ku mbagasa w'Abaganda kwegamba ng'obulamu bukalubye nga bwankalubirira genda Julius n'ayongera okungumya n'aŋŋamba nti nampulya sole yiye n'aŋŋamba abantu gye bali bangi n'aŋŋamba na wano bannammwe bangi nnyo abakola ki abakitubako kati ekyavaamu Tom netutandikira awo natugamba kati tulina okugenda ku kosu
kati ku kosu wetwatandikira process then badokita ne batugamba tugende ku musaayi badokita twagenda kosu in fact ne batugamba ne batunyonyola buli kimu ne tuddeyo ewa mwami Tom kati mwami Tom natuconnectinga kuba intersex abalala kyenali simanyi mpu nze nali mmanyi nti ndiyo nzekka kati n'atunyonyola nti abaana bangi abalingangaze gye bali.
The beginnings of CPID go as far back as 2008. We started as a support group, basically creating a safe space for people that have intersex conditions. At the time, we had only 2 clients from Tororo with their parents, and we were making use of spaces where there's counseling, and so we thought we needed to create a much more formalized space where people can come and find support and probably get referrals to the kind of support we were not able to provide.
We've been working with different partners who we think they are relevant within the whole ideology of pushing for rights for intersex children and people in Uganda.
Some of the challenges that I spoke about and would like to emphasize that intersex people face, but also we continue to face as activists and as intersex people, is basically the expectations of cultural maybe let me phrase them as cultural expectations. The way that our culture the way that our culture is set up, there are things that are required of an individual. Marriage is a requirement, but marriage that is childless is another problem. It is not enough to find a partner. That partnership must produce children. And that is a major problem for many intersex people.
When again I'm scanning, like Dr. Yagamba, nyinza obutasobola kuzaala, of which kyanumanya ekyo nti sisobola kuzaala ate nga mpulira njagala ku jabujja njagala mbeerako mu life eyo ey'okuzaala omwana.
The family bamu bafumbirwa ne baba bamu ne bawasa anti okuze nabo kati eyo ebeera too much challenge. I will give an example. One time my step brother nga tuli as we are praying nga tuli mu kuzanya kati n'agamba sister we namugamba naye nga you have too much, like you have big breasts, why don't you cut for yourself? Some knows what Gloria. It was so painful. My side was like, okay, that's how they see me, like it has like someone has to cut her big boob and give them to me, but is it possible?
Most of the time, the families who have intersex children find a lot of, one, talk about peace and tranquility to these families because it doesn't happen most of the time. You become the laughing stock of the community. Secondly, there's a lot of pressure, for example, in the marriage where women who are said, you know, to have gone outside the wedlock and gave this child. So there's always tension, and the tension of these children or the tension of these marriages are pointed to intersex people.
There are also some divorce cases because especially men who cannot handle, they think they cannot handle an intersex child, so they actually abandon their families.
We've seen cases where, you know, they call you today and, you know, this child was born in this hospital, the mother is here, and, you know, but after like 2 or 3 days following up, they will tell you the child died. But what has come to our mind is there was a serious plan of killing these babies before even they can see the light of day. Why? Because they want to avoid, you know, issues and questions and people asking so many things and how it happened, and you know.
I know of one who dumped their child at her home because they did not understand or they didn't know how to handle the situation. And then another example is these two kids these two teenagers who were like at a puberty stage. So the mothers were worried that because their children were being discriminated, stigmatized and labeled in school. It was their first year in high school. So they had to like surrender their two kids. Their two different mothers had to surrender their two kids to a home as well, so that they can find peace, because it was really tough.
The other challenge is the onset of religious expectations. We have a wave of religious dogma that is going around regarding blessing, regarding what is considered the endowment by God. So if you are lacking a little bit in one aspect of your manhood, and culture doesn't, and you escape culture, things like circumcision, things like other passages, depending on which tribe you come from, then the church will kind of net you there and say, look, if you have this, then something could have gone wrong. There's probably witchcraft going on here. There's probably sin going on here. So you need some kind of handling, special prayers, special, anointing and fasting and a whole lot of processes that in themselves are stigmatizing and to some extent are violations actually. Some religious sects take it so far and get to exorcism. They try to cast out devils and things like that.
I believe the religion need to be tolerance, acceptance, and understand that intersex people, whatever happens is beyond them and beyond their families, and therefore there's need for them to come together and ensure that these children or these intersex people, are provided to spiritually if they need or if they would want.
The church hasn't done its role, because in most cases where you see someone, behaving outside the norm, I would call it, for lack of a better term, you are supposed to bring them close and understand why they seem to be different from your congregation. It's only then you will learn to say, okay, maybe this person is intersex, and how can you be accommodative of these kinds of people in your congregations, and also when you're talking around religion.
These challenges continue to make the intersex experience a secret. People do not want to be open about the challenges they face. It is absolutely unacceptable, culturally and religiously, in Uganda and in Africa at large, for a man to be dysfunctional in any way. If it is strength, you must be strong. You cannot cry, you cannot complain, you cannot say you're unable to impregnate a woman. That would be the worst of it. So these challenges continue to affect the way that people own up to these experiences and to speak out.
Medicine and access to affirming healthcare to the intersex people, it's very expensive because it's not catered both by the government insurance and also the private insurance companies. So most of the time, the parents are forced to sell their property to ensure that the children is corrected or taken to hospitals.
Sometimes they go to clinics, the public clinics, where maybe the nurses or the doctors, they don't understand them or how to tackle their health challenges.
N'abaana abo bandibadde babazimbira amasomero kuba gye bali, kuba babeera mu banne bwe kati ng'omulenzi bw'atuuka okumera amabeere ng'ali mu ssomero ly'abaana bonna ab'olukale, kimuwa ekifaananyi kirala, kimubonyaabonya. Afuba akweka amabeere, abaana balimu okugakola ki? Okugategeera. Ajja genda abuliidinge. Kakati ajja kuba ali mu banne, omwana omulenzi mujja namwe okukyekanga abalenzi. Omwana omulenzi abuliidinga atya? Kuga kimulemesa okusoma. Baba balaba amabeere kijja mulemesa okusoma. Baba balaba buliidingi kijja mulemesa okukola ki? Era okusoma.
There's still a huge misunderstanding of intersex conditions as sicknesses, and because of that we have seen a lot of herbalists, and these days they are not even herbalists, they are called uncles and aunties, who kind of try to work around the sexual prowess of men and women.
We got many cases here. When a child is born in Uganda, people think either it's witchcraft or it's a bad omen.
When my mom gave birth to me, Kativalo was my stepmom bewitched me. And I still believe, up to now, some people still believe my stepmom bewitched me.
Sepedi yo mulimu gwayo gukoze nnyo lwa nsonga. Efuba nnyo buli bbanga lya myezi 3 ku myezi 4 balina otusisinkana. Ne batusomesa, ne batubuulirira, ne batubudaabuda. Ne bakuwangayo ne kasente k'olina okukozesa obeerewo. Obadde na bizinesi ng'eweddemu amaanyi bagyongeramu. Kuba n'ennaku zino mu coronavirus bwe baatusindikirayo emitwalo 10. basobole okubeerawo mu mbeera eyo.
So we thought this advocacy of just creating awareness is not enough. People have created awareness, people have, public education awareness. Then the question for CPID was, what next? Then we said, since public awareness and public education is not just enough for these parents, because they need money to get basic needs for these children, take them to school, take them to hospital. How do you look at supporting their entrepreneurial skills? Can they start a business as a group? So CPID decided to support these groups financially for these people to either look after chicken or goats or hire land for cultivation. And at the end of the day, these people have had small circles, we call them circles, where people keep money and, so they save money from there. So a parent can go to that circle, borrow money, maybe borrow 100,000, in return take maybe 120 with a simple interest rate. So this is how parents have been in position to stay strong within these groups, because they have seen it's not just creating awareness, but it is even impacting on their life.
So I would say there are lots of achievement. You can see from organizations like CPID, we have just been able to borrow intersex activists like us who are now able to stand up, speak up for our rights, try to encourage other intersex persons to come out also.
There is Intersex Society Persons of Kenya, there is GCYANG in Kenya, there is GMAT in Kenya, there is Intersex Society of Zambia, Zimbabwe, the same. All these people have been here in Uganda learning from CPD's models. How do we move forward as Uganda? How do we move forward as East Africa? How do we then move forward as Africa? Because we need a common voice as intersex people in Africa.
And we've also seen that with the advocacy, the sensitization we've done, the radio programs, the documentaries, there's a rise in the knowledge levels amongst the community, the general community, as well as our community in itself.
From 2009, I think the Kenyan government has been interested in the promotion and protection of the intersex rights, and that into a point that we first had two major landmark ruling on intersex in Kenya, in the whole of Africa. And other than that, the Kenyan state in 2017 formed an intersex government-led task force. And in 2017, the Kenyan parliament had a discussion on the plight of the intersex people. Other than that, the Kenyan government has continued in 2019 to form an intersex implementation committee based on the first report on intersex people. There are two bills, that one on the on assisted reproductive health of the intersex people, and there's another on amendment to the Kenyan Registration Act. So I think the Kenyan government is interested in the protection of the intersex people.
We registered the intersex clinic, I think the first of its kind in Africa. And these registrations, there are processes involved here and there, government processes, but the government said, oh, this is very important. So it accepted, So once the government accepts to work with you, I'm seeing the light of tomorrow. Why? The government is on board, different ministries within the government, for instance, Minister of Health, Minister of Education and Sports, Minister of Labour, Gender and Social Development, and so many other stakeholders are on board accepting what we are doing.
Governments are even beginning, African governments are even beginning to strike down some of their phobias on other issues of difference, that are not just sex characteristics, but issues around orientation and gender identity on the continent of Africa. So that means that we have a huge opportunity now to educate more than ever.
So we've engaged religious people and they have been open. At first it wasn't easy, But later on, through continuous engagement, advocacy, dialogue, they have accepted that this is, even an intersex child is a child of God.
As an organization, the challenge is still on to educate. How long it will take us, we can't really determine. But what we know is that we have to keep talking. We have to keep talking. The way we see the future actually for us as CIPID is we need to raise more vibrant young intersex voices to speak to these issues. People will say, look, it is okay for me to not be normal. Or maybe on the other hand to say we need to reestablish, to redefine what normal is. Because who actually sets what normal is? So we need to begin to raise voices that are younger, are vibrant, expose them, and get all this kind of messaging around.
My vision for the intersex community, not only in Kenya but in the region, is ensure that they stand up and be counted for. They are intersex and they should never fear to express who they are.
We should be proud of who we are, and we should stand up and fight for our own rights like all other movements. Yeah, we should be there, and not let others speak on our behalf. We should be our own voices.
If you want to move mountains, work as a team. How do you work as a team? Work with colleagues from different countries. Have the same goal. Let government listen to propose, because there are different unique needs depending on the country where you're coming from. But how do you push that as a team, not just as Ugandan intersex activists, but being helped by other activists from elsewhere in Africa?
Government yo tujikubiriza singa eyamba abaana kuba si bangi. Kati ku kyalo nga kino oyinza okusanga nga tekuli oba nga kuliko omwana ng'omubabi. Kyo gavumenti ebisobola otuyamba ki? Ne balabirira ne batuyamba abaana baffe ne babalongoosa. Bwe baba wano nga tebasobola ne babatwala oba ebweru ne babalongoosa. Ekisooka bonga bennyini abasawo balina okusooka ne basomesebwa. Kubanga waliwo abangi, in fact abangi tebakimanyi. Kubanga bwazaala omwana ate n'alaba omwana nga singa abaana abalala bamanyidde, kati omusawo mwennyini yasooka okukuba enduulu. Kazi azadde omwana naye omwana simutegeera, alina ebintu bibiri. Kati at the first ng'omusawo alina okusooka n'akisirikira ye ng'omusawo, n'alaba ngeri ki gy'alina okukibuuliramu maama w'omwana in the calmest way, so that maama takosezeddwa nnyo ante asigadde nga musanyufu ng'omuzadde, because that joy ng'akamala kuzaala, I think it is the best experience that every woman would want to feel.
Nze abazadde abakyensinga okwongera okubagumya oba okubawa ebirowoozo mu mutima gyabwe. Tisinga oba ozadde omwana n'omusanga ng'ali mu mbeera bw'etyo, toyita banneiba, kubanga bo batabuzi, basunzi oba boonoonyi, kuba buli omu aba n'amagezi gage. Wabula tambula butambuzi ogende mu ddwaliro.
CIPID Uganda advocates for the best case non-surgical strategy. We discourage surgery that will happen there and then. Please don't do surgery when the child is still young, because when you do surgery at that particular age, surgery is irreversible. If you do something, it is done there and then. Now we don't want this child to emotionally be traumatized in future. So we advise that let this child be in position, maybe at up to 18, when this child is in position to also be part and parcel of all the decisions that are going to be made. You understand? Why? Because we've seen cases where surgery was done at an early stage, but maybe after 4, 3, 5 years, things change. Going back to the hospital, the doctors will say, we have nothing to do because this wasn't supposed to be removed, but it was removed.
Era nze mbadde nsaba ate abasawo abalulukyala mu bantu bonna nga bafunye obwo obuzibu tebagenda na malwaliro gano ga private, private zonoonya abaana bagenda ne basanga omwana nga alina ekikula bwe kityo ne baagala mulongoosa nga muto. Bw'omulongoosa nga muto toyawula kuba oyinza omulongoosa nga yandibadde mmerabu gwe n'omuleka mu ssaamu kaakati ssaamu n'atuuka ekiseera nga ye tajja kuzaala. So nga bw'oba omulongoosezza nga mukulu aba amaze okuleeta embeera entuufu okwawulirawo. Kuba nze kati senga Alani baamulongooseza mu mbeera y'obuto nga bwe nagenda nkiraba yandibadde ndowooza oba tatereera naye kati yatereera n'aba nga ekintu kiri kyagenda kikula naye yawulira ddala ne bakulagira ddala nga ye musajja alina kuba musajja bulungi nnyo.
I even wonder where this issue of, you need to be corrected. For me, I believe for me to have the features which I have, they are supported by my body. That's what I know. If you're going to tell me, no, you are female, you're supposed to be female and your testosterone is high, for that testosterone to be high, there's something supporting it in my body. I am no more the way I am. And these surgeries should be discouraged at all costs, because they have been, I think, a source of most of the struggles for intersex persons when they grow older.
No one should lose hope. There is hope for tomorrow. We make sure whoever, I can tell every intersex activist, wherever you are, even if you don't create change yourself, make sure you leave a legacy where other people can come and pick up where you've stopped from.
Yeah, so my vision is to see a stigma-free environment where intersex persons really enjoy their rights and dignity like any other person in the environment. My other vision would be seeing an empowered intersex community, not only in Uganda, but all over Africa and the globe.
I want a society that is cognizant of the intersex existence. I want a society that where we can all live free, fair, without discrimination. I would want a society that, says, or it doesn't even have to make a fuss that, you're born differently and therefore you need to be within a certain parameter, or, I would love to be in a society where every individual are respected and live with dignity.
I would love to see a Zambia where the rights of intersex persons are upheld by all, and intersex persons living dignified lives. And I would also want to see, intersex persons taking up spaces, let's say for example, being able to attain higher education so that they can be able to be lawyers, for example, doctors. They can be there in the spaces so that they can also be able to, assist in serving the community and also raising awareness in the different spaces. And not forgetting talking about policy. We need someone to also help us drive the policy change, because they will be there and they will understand what the issues are.
Kyensaba ndi kyempulira kyenjagala ku mutima nkole my surgery mbeere very successful, and secondly I want to help the intersex persons. I want to help the intersex children. I want really to come out and speak and tell them, you know what, stop being self-discrimination and self-stigma, because be who you are, stand up and raise your issues, because no matter what people say, you will always be you will always be the child of God, no matter what.
They should never feel less of a human being. They are normal and they are beautifully and wonderfully made in the image of God. They should step up and be able to voice out their issues, because it's only them who understands their issues and how much it hurts to be where they are. So they need to voice up and be able to stand and be a voice for their communities, unlike leaving others to speak for you, because if we let that happen, in most cases our issues will never get to where they should be.